AACC Annual Meeting and Clinical Lab Expo, Exhibitor University. My name is Teresa Ronk, and I'm the marketing contact for the Exhibitor University. What exactly is AACC Annual Meeting and Clinical Lab Expo, Exhibitor University? Well, it is a free resource for you and your exhibiting staff, focused on expanding exhibiting know-how and providing sales and marketing tips to improve your company's exhibiting performance and ROI. And this service will be delivered to you in the form of e-newsletters, social media posts, and live and replayable exhibitor webinars. Today's webinar is entitled Creating Your Sales and Marketing Strategic Approach for AACC Annual Meeting and Clinical Lab Expo. Our presenter has 3 decades of experience in working trade shows. She's been the exhibitor in the booth, the sales leader for booth staff, as well as coach and trainer for booth staff. In other words, she understands and knows your challenges. She has coached and trained exhibitors from organizations such as Smith Buckland, Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association, Long Beach Convention and Visitors Bureau, Intercontinental Hotels, Starwood Hotels, and many more. I have had the pleasure of working with her for the past few years as she has coached exhibitors to help them maximize their efforts and time at trade shows. Please join me in welcoming Ellen M. Wilson, Sales and Marketing Coach and Trainer.
Thank you, Teresa, and hello, everyone. I, too, am glad that you're participating in our webinar today. You know, some of the information we're going to cover will be new to you, and some of it will probably be a refresher. However, all of the information will be relevant to making this show a success for you and your company. By this time, you've had an opportunity to take a look at the cartoon that's up. And you know, this cartoon is pretty funny, especially if it applies to your competition. But there's a powerful lesson in the cartoon, and that lesson is, if you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always gotten. Today, we want to focus on 4 primary topics that will help you get more than what you've always gotten. At the end of today's webinar, you will be able to create a sales and marketing strategic plan for your participation in the 2014 AACC Annual Meeting and Clinical Lab Expo. To get you to creating that plan, we will discuss determining what success will look like for you at the show. What will be your return on your investment in time and dollars, and what are the appropriate metrics that go with that? We will also take a look at linking your sales and marketing efforts to meeting your show objectives. We will talk about selecting, training, preparing, and coaching your booth staff to meet those objectives. And finally, we'll set your sights for the next step, and that's working the booth. So in the true sense of a university, let's get started with a little true or false quiz. I'm going to present you with 5 facts, and I would like for you to write down whether you think they are true or false. So here goes. 87% of trade show leads captured are never effectively followed up on. 86% of companies have no organized form of post-show measurement. 86% of exhibit staffers have never received 1 single hour of professional skills training on how to work a trade show. 80% of exhibitors do little or no targeted pre-show marketing. 76% of exhibitors set no specific objectives for trade shows. Let's see how you did. If you answered true to all 5 facts, then you scored 100%. Congratulations. We're here today to make sure that you do not become one of those statistics. You know, everyone talks about measurement, and everyone has a different idea of what that means. The first step to being a successful exhibitor is to determine ahead of time what success means to you and your company. In other words, you want to begin with the end in mind. Remember, 76% of exhibitors set no specific objectives for trade shows. So to begin with the end in mind, you will want to ask yourself, what are your objectives for attending the show? In a few minutes, we will discuss possible answers to this question. You will also want to take a look at your target audience. What target audience will you go after during the show? And we will discuss the roles of people who will visit your booth at the show later in this webinar. Third, you'll want to look at what strategies will help you meet your objectives. And then finally, fourth, how will you measure success? There's an old maxim that says, what gets measured gets done. However, we will make sure the plan you create measures what really matters. Answering all of these questions will be the start to setting your strategic approach for working the show. So let's take a look at the next graphic on how the exhibit dollar is spent. What this graphic tells us is pretty shocking, and that is that out of every $1 spent on exhibiting at a show, only 1 cent, just 1 penny, is spent on exhibitor training, and just 4 cents, less than a nickel, is spent on lead management. Now, where's the logic in this spending pattern? So let's take a look then and think about these numbers we've gone over. If we couple the true facts about the high percentage of exhibitors who do not plan, train, set objectives, and do no pre-show marketing, with the few cents per exhibitor dollar spent on training and lead management, 5 cents total, it is very plain to see where the gaps occur. Your sales and marketing strategic approach will fill those gaps. Having clear objectives of what you expect to accomplish at a trade show will help you spend your trade show money wisely and effectively. There are no quote-unquote right objectives. They should be personalized to the needs of your organization, and every organization will have slightly different objectives, even those organizations within the same industry. Before exhibiting at a trade show, select the objectives, what you want to achieve, and determine the metrics you will use to measure your success. This step is crucial. Without clearly defined measurement criteria, you will never know how effective you've been in meeting your objectives. Don't take on more than you can handle, though. A trade show cannot do everything. I recommend that you select 1 to 3 strategic objectives for the show and measure those well. You could choose from among some of the most common objectives, such as generating qualified sales leads, introducing new products, entering a new market, recruiting new employees, lending support to your industry, or gathering new prospects. And of course, there are other objectives that you might want to include in that list. So let's just say, for example, you talk with your team and you decide there are 4 objectives you would like to achieve at the show. Those being increase brand awareness, introduce new products, find new customers, and build customer relationships. Now, choosing 4 objectives may be ambitious, but it certainly is doable. So next you will need to decide what metrics you're going to assign against these objectives. Metrics can be either activity-based, results-based, or operational-based. Activity-based metrics, simply put, is counting. For example, an activity-based metrics could be how many leads you're going to generate, how many people visited the booth. Your activity-based metrics don't really satisfy the organization's need to understand the sales contribution, and therefore I would caution you to not use activity-based metrics in isolation for every strategy that you have in place. If possible, always try to couple it with either a results-based or operational-based metric. Then results-based metrics measure something more concrete than activity. For example, the number of closed sales, the dollar value of those sales, or the dollar potential of RFPs received. Then operational-based metrics measure the efficiency and the effectiveness of an operation or a process. This metric does not show how to secure more revenue-producing customers or how to keep those customers. And therefore, for the sake of our discussion in this webinar, we're going to focus on activity-based metrics and results-based metrics. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So if you take a look at the slide, how attendees like to walk the floor, this is a slide that provides a resource for you in helping you to determine the metrics you will use. As an example, you will see that in the fourth line down, 55% of the attendees for the show say they like to walk through and observe without speaking to the vendors unless they approach the vendors. So having this type of data available to you would help you in identifying what metrics you will want to use. So more than likely, these people may be new prospects. So how are you going to measure, or will you choose to measure whether or not they come to your booth? You will also see that 46% of the people say that they like to meet and talk to vendors that they do not know. Again, this tells you that there is an opportunity for you to get new prospects out of 46% of the attendees of the show. So again, this is a resource that you can use to help you figure out what some of your metrics might be. Once you've identified your objectives and your metrics, you will want to identify a measurement tool. For example, if one of your objectives is to increase brand awareness and the accompanying metrics are the number of leads generated, you will want to determine the measurement tools that you will use to actually capture those number of leads. And let's just take a quick look at the slide here for all 4 of the quadrants that we identified as strategies and some of the possibilities of metrics. Introducing new products, maybe you will want to measure the number of product demos or the number of proposals that were requested. If you are trying to find new customers, maybe you will want to use as a metric the number of qualified leads. At this point, I'd like to just stop and talk about the fact that we've said qualified leads for finding new customers and just number of leads for increasing brand awareness. The difference being in number of leads, it's simply capturing contact information, whereas in number of qualified leads, you're capturing information about the real potential for your company and your product. And then, of course, over to building customer relationships, you could measure the number of interactions with existing customers or the number of RFPs that existing customers brought to your booth. So this way, you can see how you can actually measure. You can take a look at your metrics, and you can put measurements in place for those metrics. And then we'll go to the next slide. So the next thing that you will want to talk about and think about for your strategic plan will be your target audience. Who are you going after? What do these people look like, and what do they bring to the table? Again, here's a resource for you that tells you what the attendee demographics are for this particular show. So as an example, in the third bullet down, we see that 60% of attendees of the show hold management positions, with 25% of them holding titles of VP or higher. And if we could just go back for one moment, we also see that 72% of the attendees have management oversight of one or more functions at their particular sites. And now we can go forward. So again, these are just some examples of who your target audience might be. This slide that we're looking at now gives you the breakdown by position title for all attendees. Again, we see that that VP or higher is at 24%, a pretty large number. A director or assistant director at 17%. And you can just take a look and see who is it that you need to be talking to in order to help you meet your goals for the show. And we're ready to move on. So this is part one of the strategic planner that we talked about. What we've done so far is we've taken a look at what your objectives could be. We've taken a look at metrics. We've discussed measurement and the possible target audience. So we'll just go through that first line. The objective is to increase brand awareness. The metrics for that will be number of leads, number of increased websites, and the measurement for the number of leads will be a daily roundup to discuss the leads received. The target audience will be lab supervisors. So again, this is part one of the objectives, metrics and measurement. So now let's talk a little about linking your sales and marketing efforts. There will be another Exhibitor University webinar that will go into great detail about the marketing resources available to you to promote your participation at the show. However, for now, we would like to touch on some of the basics of the relationship between sales and marketing. What is the difference between the two? Let's just think about that for a moment. Well, without marketing, you would not have prospects or leads to follow up with, but yet without a good sales process and strategy, your closing rate would probably depress you. Marketing and sales should work together. If we were to break it down to the basics, marketing is everything that you do to reach out and persuade prospects, while sales is everything that you do to close the sale and to get a signed agreement or contract. Both are necessities to the success of a business. You cannot do one without the other. You cannot do without either process. If you work to strategically combine both efforts, you will experience a successful amount of business growth. This is especially true when working trade shows. Your marketing should consist of strategies that measure your reach and work to persuade your prospects that you are the company for them. It's the message that prepares the prospect for the sale. It could consist of advertising, public relations, relationship marketing, social media, or brand marketing. I like to think of it this way. Your marketing efforts begin the process of those 8 contacts or touch points that studies tell us it takes to move a prospect or potential client to the close of the sale. Next bullet. The process, the sales process rather, consists of interpersonal interaction. It is often done by a one-on-one meeting or a networking session or working a trade show. It's anything that engages you with the prospect or customer on a personal level rather than from a distance. Most of the time, the prospect or potential customer has been driven to you via your marketing efforts. In the case of working a trade show booth, you are conducting a series of a lot of little sales calls on a lot of prospects. Remember the fact we learned earlier that said 80% of exhibitors do little or no targeted pre-show marketing? Well, here's another opportunity for you to fill a gap that will lead to more success for you at the show. Last bullet and next slide. And we all know that at the end of the day, what's really measured is sales. So let's take a look at what your planner would look like at this point. You have your objectives, You've identified your target audience, and you would want to plug in some resources for that, and now we start applying dates. So let's go to the second line where the objective is find new customers. You start that on January 15th. Your target audience could be VP or higher. We saw that from the attendee demographics. And maybe the marketing initiative against this is an email blast with a special booth incentive. The resources that you have identified that you're going to put against that, and we're just talking dollar resources right now, is $5,000, and the due date to have this completed would be February 1st. So again, an example of how to work with your marketing initiatives to help you meet your show objectives. And next slide, please. So we've talked about putting the strategy in place, and we've talked about the metrics and the measurements and the target audience and the marketing initiative, but we need to talk about the people that are going to be at the show representing you. So in this section of the webinar, we're going to talk about selecting, training, preparing, and coaching your booth staff. The number one thing people will remember about your exhibit will not be your wonderful graphics. It's going to be your booth staff. I have no doubts that you have a dynamic, experienced sales staff. However, they still need training, they still need preparation, and they still need coaching before each trade show they attend. Unfortunately, most exhibits are staffed with well-meaning people who are experts in their area of specialization, but they often lack the experience and the training to engage attendees and conduct conversations of mutual value and or interest. During our true and false exercise at the top of the webinar, we learned that 86% of exhibit staffers have never received one single hour of professional skills training on how to work a trade show. Some statistics even tell us that 85% of an exhibiting company's success is determined by the people staffing the exhibit. So again, here's an opportunity to fill a very wide gap. In our discussion on booth staff, we will go over who are the right people to have in the booth. How will you coach and train them for their participation in the booth? And we'll get back to the basics and talk about that boothsmanship 101. So, who are the right people to have in the booth? Obviously, not everyone is well suited to effectively and positively perform all the duties required during all the scheduled hours of the show. Just because Marion has been your top salesperson for the past 3 years doesn't mean she is necessarily the right person to have in your booth. You also should not feel obligated to send a salesperson to a show because the show takes place in their geographic market. Now, I know that a lot of organizations choose to deploy their sales team to trade shows this way, but it could potentially spell disaster. Remember to select your booth staff with care. Like your signage, they contribute to the image you are presenting to your audience. Another way of thinking about it is your booth staff holds the success of your company in their hands during the show. So then what are we looking for in the person that's going to be in the booth, or the persons that will be in the booth? First of all, a good attitude. If they don't want to be there, why send them? Now, I know you're thinking about now, they're going to go if I tell them to go, but how's that going to work for you? Prospects and existing customers will be able to spot this wish I were anywhere else attitude straight away. There's an old adage which says you can take a willing person and make them capable, but you cannot take a capable person and make them willing. Again, do you want to put your company's success in this person's hands? You also need to make sure that the person is approachable. They should be outgoing and have personable and polite mannerisms about them. They should be knowledgeable. That means being well informed about your product as well as your competitors' products. That includes the features, the benefits, and the values. They should be outgoing and enthusiastic. A trade show is no place for the wallflower at the dance. They must be comfortable enough to present and demonstrate within the often chaotic trade show environment. This certainly is not the place for your introverted salesperson. Okay, introverted salesperson, you're thinking, oxymoron. Well, it's not. Some salespeople thrive in the one-to-one relationships with clients, but throw them into a crowd and they spontaneously combust. They should be good listeners. This is where we apply the rule of 2 to 1. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. They should be good communicators. They need to be able to mix their people skills with their product knowledge and technical skills. And they should certainly be polite to shoppers. You want to qualify people so that they're not wasting your time, but you should also remember that they may be a true customer one day. Remember those statistics that we saw earlier that said 55% of the attendees of the show just want to walk around and observe and not talk with booth staff. So we want to make sure that we embrace these people while respecting the way they choose to attend the show. They should not be afraid of rejection. They just have to remember it's not about them, it's just business. And they have to be able to work a crowd. They should adopt the attitude of it's multitasking people rather than multitasking projects or things. During the days of the trade show, your booth staff will have more influence over your prospects' perceptions and decisions than your products, your services, or your company's reputation. So I'm asking this question one more time. Whose hands do you want to place your company's success in? So let's talk a little bit about the basics of trade show booth participation and attendance. When I started working trade shows over 30 years ago, we were taught no smoking, no food or beverage in the booth, no chewing gum. And unfortunately, that's still a discussion that needs to be had today. And you cannot say it enough to the folks participating in your booth. You also want to make sure that their appearance is what is consistent with your company's image. Definitely have a conversation about their attire. Remind them that the trade show booth is simply their business office away from the office for a few days. Their attire should remain tasteful, clean, crisp, and again, to your company's standards. Some companies choose to have all of their booth personnel in a type of uniform. The key point to remember here is that people have different body types, and you will want to choose the uniform that complements everyone. You will be doing a great disservice to booth personnel who have to be concerned with tugging, pulling, and fixing something all day. They will not be able to have the air of confidence you want them to have in front of customers, prospects, and yes, even your competition. So the next basic is the attitude. We've already talked about this a bit, but I think it bears repeating that you teach skills, but you cannot teach attitude. And then the final basic is body language. Communication research indicates that 80 to 90% of all human communication is based on nonverbal clues or anything other than words. This is how we as humans communicate our emotions and our attitudes, and it's done through a variety of things, such as gestures, facial expressions, touch, even smell, and voice rate and intonation. Body language may provide clues as to a person's state of mind. For example, it may indicate aggression, attentiveness, boredom, a relaxed state, pleasure, amusement, and even intoxication. However, we should remember that body language is not a one-size-fits-all, and we have to be careful we do not misread and misunderstand what is going on with someone. Some cultural differences may reflect body language which is different from yours. Be mindful of that and do not misread what the person is communicating. More importantly, when in the trade show booth, you will want to make sure that your body language reflects the confident, knowledgeable professional that you are. Remember, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. A few body language tips that I just want to share with you would be mindful of your posture, your eye contact, and your speech, and again, the tone of voice. And now I'm ready for the next one. Thank you. Booth etiquette. Yes, there are some things that are just wrong and rude to do when you work a trade show booth. But let's focus on the right things to do, such as stand up and greet the attendees as they come into your booth. Meet them at the beginning of your booth. Don't make them walk all the way back into the depth of the booth just to be greeted. You want to smile and make eye contact. Make them feel like they're the only person on that trade show floor at the minute that they're interacting with you. And again, we've said this about crossing arms and legs, but it gives off a defensive and a stay away from me sort of stance. So you definitely do not want to do that. And you want to thank the attendees for spending time with you in your booth. And you'll want to do this twice, when they enter the booth and again when they're exiting the booth. Next one, please. So now we look at what your complete sales and marketing planner will look like. You see your start dates, your objectives, your metrics, your target audience, your marketing initiative, the resources that you will deploy to those initiatives, your due dates, and now your booth staff. And I want to point out in particular on that first line for booth staff, we have M. Smith there as a technician. And this is to say that the best person for your show may not necessarily be a salesperson. It could be someone else. And especially as you match that against who your target audience is, and in this case, it's a lab supervisor. So these are the things you want to take a look at. You will receive a copy of this sales and marketing planner, and you will receive two copies actually, one that is completed and that will give you the instructions for you to complete it, and then a blank template for you to work through on your own. But this is what you want to do in preparation for the show as you think about how am I going to get the most return on this show. Here is your guide for getting that done. So what are our key takeaways for today? First, you want to determine your strategy, set your objectives, establish your metrics. Next, you want to link your marketing and promotion efforts to your sales activity. And then finally, you want to make sure that you select, train, prepare, and coach your booth staff for representing your organization during the trade show hours. So again, I thank you for your participation, and Teresa, it's back to you.
Thank you, Ellen, for sharing all that great information today, and thank all of you for joining us. In the true spirit of a university, we started you out with a pop quiz, and we're going to end with a homework assignment. And that assignment is to complete the sales and marketing planner that Ellen has so graciously provided to us for today. Please keep in mind that the next webinar will provide you with additional tools and resources to apply to your marketing initiatives. And also here, as you can see, we have a list of all the webinars that we have planned for you. And as always, we are here to help. And so thank you and goodbye.